Welcome back to We're Here and We Matter, the podcast that actually talks about women with bleeding disorders.
Liam! We're the women with the bleeding disorders. Flip the camera around.
I thought this was the boys episode.
It's the episode about being a good male advocate.
Huh?
It means standing up for women, listening to women, and supporting women.
Thanks, Riley. Look, we know that girls, women, and people with double X's are not being properly seen and heard when it comes to bleeding disorders. So today, we're talking about how men can be good advocates. Without further ado, Dr. Robert Sedonio Jr.
Hi, Rachel and Jess. I'm Dr. Robert Sedonio Jr.
Thanks for coming on our show.
We kept seeing this word, nomenclature, come up in your papers.
Nomenclature. A system for giving names to things. So why does naming something matter when it comes to hemophilia?
We initially, when we took a look at all the literature, how you approach and how you call somebody that's a hemophilia carrier wasn't very clear. So if you did a search and you tried to put papers together, and often people would use different terms. Symptomatic carrier, hemophilia carrier, sometimes you'd say women and girls with hemophilia.
That's a lot of terms.
It wasn't really clear what to call the population that has factor levels less than 40 or 50%. To us, it's very simple that do this work. You should call them hemophiliacs. They have hemophilia. And so I think that was really clear. We want to use the same naming system that we use for our male counterparts. For our women and girls.
Basically, you're saying if you have less than 40 or 50% of factor levels, you should be named a hemophiliac. Yeah, this makes total sense to me.
The other part that was challenging is what do you do with the hemophilia carriers that have levels that are above what's considered a normal level? And so if I saw a patient that had that level, I wouldn't see them anymore because they don't have a bleeding disorder. And so that's what we came up with a challenge. And there's pretty good data that all the way up to 60% women continue to have bleeding symptoms in excess of what you would expect. And so we wanted to make sure we honored them, and we wanted to take back the term. This term symptomatic carrier had been thrown around a lot for everybody. So if you were a carrier and you had hemophilia deficiency down to 1%, somebody would say you're a symptomatic carrier. And it's almost an insult, because you should be getting the same as a male counterpart.
So women who had the same hemophilia deficiency as men were, and still sometimes are, called symptomatic carriers?
What about folks who have higher levels but are still having symptoms?
So we wanted to call those that have levels in excess of 50% as being a symptomatic carrier, meaning they still need to be followed. You still need to consider what to do for their bleeding plans.
This makes so much sense. Because, okay, so for me, I have higher levels, but they're usually between 35 to 45%. Even for me, it took them a long time to say I have hemophilia. My mom has symptoms, but her levels are normal. So they never help her or give her factor. They're always like, you're fine. Your levels are good. But it would be so helpful for her to actually have a bleeding plan. Because she bleeds a lot sometimes. I mean, she's even used my brother's factor a few times because a bleed was so bad.
And she should be taken seriously.
Having the right name for something matters.
If medical professionals start labeling it in their system,
then people can actually get help.
Hey, so we're working on building a worksheet for girls to take to their doctors. What should be on it?
You can Google self-BAT or self-bleeding assessment tool, and you can just calculate your score.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I think it's nice to list all your surgeries, all your procedures, and whether you bled or not, or whether you took something to prevent bleeding, or you took something after the fact. Because sometimes we think of bleeding symptoms, somebody has surgical bleeding, I might be focused on that because that's really important to protect somebody, but it could be their nosebleeds. That's really obnoxious to them. And so I need to make sure that person or some other physician needs to treat that.
This is really helpful.
I'm honored to be a part of this.
Thank you! Naming things matters.
Like naming the fact that you have a boyfriend?
Like naming your total and utter Taylor Swift obsession?
Which there's nothing wrong with.
It was only one date. Hey, bye!